All right, let's dive into one of the most important documents in modern investing, Warren Buffett's 1993 letter to shareholders. We're not going to treat this like some historical artifact. No, this is an active playbook. It's a masterclass with principles that are just as powerful for professional investors today as they were 3 decades ago.
And we're going to start with the single sentence that is the key to the entire Berkshire Hathaway philosophy. Seriously, this one idea separates accounting games from economic reality, and it's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover. If you get this, you get Buffett.
So here's how we're going to break this down. We've pulled out 6 core sections. First, that all-important difference between book and intrinsic value. Then, we'll redefine risk, explore why concentration can be a superpower, and see it all in action with a real acquisition. After that, a new way to calculate earnings, and we'll wrap up with the hidden engines that power the whole Berkshire machine.
Okay, let's start with this foundational concept. Buffett really forces us to look past what the accountants give us in the financial statements and ask a much, much deeper question. What is this business really worth economically over the long haul?
This right here is the critical distinction. You've got 2 ways of looking at value. On one hand, book value. That's just history. It's the capital that's been shoved into a business. But intrinsic value, well, that's the future. It's an estimate of all the cash you can pull out of that business for the rest of its life. Buffett tracks book value, sure, but he invests based on intrinsic value. For any analyst, that's a massive mental shift. And this quote from his mentor, Ben Graham, perfectly explains why he does this. In the short run, the market is just a popularity contest, a voting machine. But over time, the market always comes back to the fundamental economic reality of a business. It becomes a weighing machine. Focusing on intrinsic value means you're focused on what the business will eventually weigh, not what the crowd is voting on today. Okay, next up, risk. Now, mainstream finance has a very specific mathematical way of defining risk. Buffett argues that this definition isn't just a little bit wrong, it's dangerously misleading. He offers a framework that's actually grounded in business reality.
For decades, Wall Street and academia have told us that risk equals volatility, and they measure it with this number called beta. It's clean, it's precise, it's based on how much a stock price has bounced around in the past. The problem is, as Buffett sees it, while it might be precise, it's also precisely wrong.
And here's the absurdity he points out. Let's say there's a fantastic business you'd love to own at $100 a share. The market panics and it drops to 60. According to beta, that stock just got riskier. But does that make any sense? You're getting the exact same future cash flows, but now they're 40% off. For a real investor, that's not risk, that's opportunity.
So instead of that one flawed number, Buffett gives us this qualitative checklist. For him, real risk isn't about how much a stock price wiggles. It's about the durability of the business, the quality and integrity of its managers, and, this is critical, the price you pay. This is the mindset of a business owner, not a stock trader.
Now, if you accept this new definition of risk, it completely flips the script on how you should build a portfolio. It leads to a strategy that to many sounds like pure heresy. If risk is just not knowing what you're doing, then maybe owning hundreds of companies you barely understand is the riskiest thing you can do.
Buffett asks this really simple question that just cuts through all the noise. He says, look, if you want 100% of a fantastic private business like See's Candies, you would never ever sell it. So why on earth would you rush to sell a small piece of an equally fantastic public company like Coca Cola just because the price went up a bit?
And this gets to the absolute core of it for any serious investor. Diversification is, basically, protection against ignorance. It's vital if you don't know what you're doing. But if you've done the hard work, if you've really dug in and found a handful of truly superior businesses, then adding your 20th best idea instead of more of your absolute best idea, well, you're just increasing your real risk and watering down your returns.
He even quotes Mae West to hammer the point home, which is just fantastic. When you find a truly great investment, your job isn't to run around looking for a dozen mediocre ones to dilute it. Your job is to concentrate your capital where you have the highest conviction and the deepest understanding.
So that's the theory. But what does it look like in practice? Let's dig into a real-world decision. Back in 1993, Berkshire bought a company called Dexter Shoe. And the story behind it tells you everything you need to know about Buffett's approach to buying an entire business.
I love this quote from the letter. So much for strategic plans. It tells you that Berkshire didn't have some grand top-down strategy to get into the shoe business. They weren't running industry analyses or looking for synergies. They just found a fantastic opportunity that checked all their boxes.
And this is the blueprint. It's incredibly simple, right? They look for a business with a durable competitive advantage, run by people with talent and integrity. Dexter Shoe is a perfect match.
And pay attention to that last point. Buffett's job isn't to come in and run the business. It's to find the 400 hitters and then get out of their way.
Okay, this next part is a really powerful tool that you can actually use in your own analysis. See, standard GAAP accounting can really hide a company's true earning power. Buffett's concept of look-through earnings gives you a much more honest, economically sound picture of what's going on.
The logic here is so smart. Look, when Berkshire owns, say, 7% of Coca Cola, accounting rules say they can only report the dividends they receive as income. But Coke is also keeping and reinvesting billions in profits on Berkshire's behalf. Those retained earnings are real economic gains, and the look-through concept makes those hidden gains visible.
And just look at the numbers from '93 to see how huge this is. Berkshire's reported operating earnings were $478 million. But when you add their share of the undistributed earnings from companies like Coke and Geico, the true look-through number jumps to $856 million. It's nearly double. It paints a completely different picture of the company's real progress.
All right, finally, let's pull back the curtain on the two structural advantages that have been the rocket fuel for Berkshire's compounding machine for decades. We're talking about the unique economics of insurance and a very, very smart approach to taxes.
The concept of insurance float is just pure genius. Think about it. Berkshire collects premiums from customers up front, but they don't have to pay out claims until later, sometimes much later. In the meantime, they get to invest all that money, the float, for their own benefit. And in a year like 1993, when they actually made a profit on the underwriting, they were literally being paid to borrow billions of dollars. It's one of the greatest business models ever.
And then there's taxes. Buffett uses this amazing story from an old comic strip called Lil Abner to show the insane power of deferring taxes. If you start with $1 and double your money every year but pay a 35% tax on your gains annually, you end up with about $22,000. But if you let that same dollar compound tax deferred and only pay the tax bill at the very end, it grows to $130 million. The difference is just staggering.
So the big takeaway here is that buy and hold isn't just some quaint philosophy. It is a massive mathematical advantage. Every single time you sell a winning stock, you're inviting the taxman to the party, and you are permanently crippling your compounding machine. A long-term strategy lets your capital work for you, completely uninterrupted.
And that leaves us with the big question, the one that every single one of us has to grapple with today. Buffett built his empire by deliberately avoiding businesses that were undergoing rapid technological change. But today, the market is dominated by those very industries. So is that discipline a timeless advantage that protects you from the unpredictable? Or is it a blind spot that risks missing out on the greatest value creation of our time? That's the question we'll leave you with.